Okay, everybody. So, welcome to our presentation on the launch vehicle design. Oh my God, there's a typo. All right. Moving on. We're the Awesome Company. I'm Lisa Davids, and go ahead and
Kelsey Rogers.
Yes, Kelsey Rogers. Okay, so here's our overview slide, and you can see some specs there. Our weight is 105,000 pounds, and our height is 75 for our vehicle, and the diameter, at least the largest diameter, is 5 feet. We have 3 stages.
Was it 5 feet?
Yeah, Kelsey, remember? Oh my God. Yes, it's 5 feet, and our payload weight is 600 pounds. And then our cost is $8,234,259.25.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay, Kelsey, this is your slide.
We did a bunch of calculations. So we
Oh my
did.
God, yeah. So let me just explain that
No,
is the
so we
weight.
did the force and the weights,
Yeah,
and pi was involved.
yeah.
Yep. And then we found out that our total weight, as you can see, was 186,579.2 units.
It's self-explanatory. So we'll move on. And so here are some sample calculations that we thought were important to include. So you can see how we got our thrust for the first stage. We had a thrust to weight ratio of 2, and then you see the weight there. And then also the cost per pound of payload. We took our total cost and divided by the payload weight like you're supposed to do. And you see we got $13,723 per pound of the launch vehicle.
So,
Okay.
dude, we did 2 stages. The first one was a ton of thrust, as you can see, and our ISP was decent. So that's our ISP. And then our ISP on the next one was a little bit more, so that's better, right? Yeah. And then thrust was a little lower. So, and this is an example of a motor. That's actually one of our engines, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And so here are drawings. What? Here are our drawings for our launch vehicle. And, so I forgot to put dimensions on, but you can see there's 3 stages, not just 2 stages. Here's our first stage and our second stage, and oh yeah, don't look
at payload bay. That's not our stage.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so that's our vehicle, and you can see the height to diameter ratio here is perfect. It's like right in line where it's supposed to be. Do you want to do the summary, Kelsey?
Yeah. So our rocket design employs the 2 stages, weighs 100,000 pounds, and is 78 feet tall. The diameter being different for the 2 stages, with stage 1 being 5 feet, and stage 2 is the same as the payload diameter of 4 feet. The weight of each stage is within the budgeted amount recommended by the Stage Optimizer program by 15%. The material used include aluminum and stainless steel. Materials, yeah, so the payload weight accommodates 600 pounds, so ours is clearly the best. The thrust and the ISPs of the motors also match up. What are you recording? Professor Davids, why are you smiling? What's wrong? Also match up to what's required for each stage within 10%.
Oh my God.
What's
okay, anyway, so do you guys have any questions? That's the end of our presentation.
Yeah. It's hard not to laugh.
So I figured we'd start with like just the general, because I didn't make a slide uh, talking about like what we did in terms of our oral part because I wasn't sure exactly what all we were going to do.
Yeah.
So I figure we'll start with that. You want to talk about what unprofessional behaviors you did, and then I'll talk about my unprofessional behaviors, and then we'll go into the slides.
Absolutely. That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Take it away whenever you are ready.
So for starters, it's important we show up in professional attire for our presentations. Please do not wear hats or sunglasses. That's ridiculous. And yes, in class we wear masks, but not that kind of masks. And this is on Zoom, so you don't need to be wearing masks on Zoom. Also, when you're talking, make sure you go over ahead of time who's going to do which slides. You don't need to point out what you did on the slide when somebody else is presenting. Make sure you understand the words that you're reading. So, for instance, specific impulse, ISP, don't call it ISPs. And make sure you know your units. So when you're talking about a weight, make sure you know if it's in pounds or kilograms ahead of time. Don't just leave something unitless when it has units to it. Also, make sure that you, again, talk with the person you're working with ahead of time so you know which parts you're doing. And be prepared. Do not go on your phones in the middle of your presentation, and your phone should be on silent so you shouldn't hear them going off. Don't have things playing on the TV in the background. Don't be looking around the room. When somebody else is presenting, pay attention to the people on your team presenting.
Yes, and try not to eye roll if somebody makes a mistake. If you make a mistake, you don't have to point it out. Just go with it, or you can be honest and just say, oh, sorry, that's a mistake, but we'll fix that in the technical report. But you just want to recover very smoothly. We don't need to point out everybody's mistakes, and certainly be compassionate with your team members. Everybody's a little nervous, and no interrupting your teammate when they are presenting their slide, even if they are stumbling. You may want to have like a cue between one another if you do need a teammate to rescue you. But if you're not getting that cue, let your teammate present their slides.
Also, significant figures. So we talked about the rocket costing down to 25 cents. Do you think they're really counting pennies on a multi-million-dollar rocket? So things like little details like that too.
Yes. All right, so we're going to go into the slides because we have some critiques on each of those lovely slides that we presented.
Just to begin, if you are going to do pictures that take up your whole background, make sure you pick a high quality image. This looks just blurry and abstract, and it's not supposed to. If you also look, you have white text on a yellow background, so be careful about your text colors, your placement, the sizing. Notice how critiques is the easiest thing to see on this slide, but the name of this is not the lunch, but the launch vehicle design. You can put your team name, so if you are the awesome company, then put that, whatever your team is. And again, check for typos. Make sure that everyone looks at the slides, because one person might miss the typo while they're creating it, but hopefully in a team of 3 or 4 people, at least one person will notice the typo before you get to presentation day.
Okay, so on our first overview slide, let's soak that in for a minute. And all of the critiques I would say on this slide, we have yellow font, which is not desirable. It's very difficult to read. And our background is not appropriate. It has nothing to do with a launch vehicle. I shouldn't say nothing to do, but it's not a launch vehicle, and it certainly doesn't match up with the specs. So we want to make sure that you actually have pictures and figures of your design, especially when you're giving physical data like heights and diameters. Having a picture would be the most useful. And if you do use a background, as Dr. Rogers mentioned, for your entire background, let's make sure it's not dominating the slide. So, you know, the picture maybe should be grayed out a little, or, you know, maybe smaller. And I believe Dr. Rogers already mentioned significant digits. That's a big thing we should be looking at for our final results.
All right, so on weight calculations, do not ever include any pictures of whiteboards or logbook notes. that's great. You should be doing all of that in the process. But when you're going to present, you need to type it out. You need to make it professional and you need to make it finalized. Also, the results on the presentation, the focus on the presentation are your results, not your calculations.
So along with that, we really actually don't want to see any calculations in your presentation. Your report should showcase all of that hard work you've done, but in your presentation, you really only have about 5 minutes to give your presentation. So you want to just focus on results. And just like yellow font, please no red font.
All right, so here's our next slide. So again, this gets to the font color and the background color. Make sure you have an adequate contrast, because a lot of times you're also presenting on different screens, so you don't know what the screen might look like to somebody else. If you pick something that is like a dark blue to a lighter blue, such as this, it's might be visible on your screen, but if somebody else doesn't have the same brightness level, it might not be visible on theirs. And especially if you use a projector, it's going to look very different. And then also make sure your results are actually, well, your information is actually specific and complete. So they don't say anything about which motor these are or any details. You just have these specific specs that you have no idea what that's connected to.
This is my favorite slide. Just a little side note, some of these slides are from actual student presentations, and this is one of them. These were hand sketches that I roughly did in my office for some students, and then they showed up in their presentation. So number one, don't use somebody else's hand sketches without giving them credit, even though I did not really want credit for these. And your drawings that are going to show up in your presentation and in your report need to look more professional. So we understand that not everyone is in EGR 120, and you're just learning potentially how to hand sketch, but you should still be using straight edges. You can use stencils, you can use French curves. And if you are in 120 and you've gotten far enough in your CATIA learning, feel free to use CAD, but it is not required. But definitely not these very messy, rough sketches. That should not appear in your presentation or report.
All right, and this slide. Notice I was reading the paragraph. That's awful. Please do not do that in any of your presentations. You need to avoid paragraphs like this. It should be bullet points. And even when it is bullet points, you shouldn't be reading those either. It should just be a guideline to help you stay focused on your main points. Again, do not read from the slides.
Okay, I think that completes our critiques. I'm sure that you can find some other errors and mistakes. There were some consistencies in numbers. At one point we said 3 stages, and then the drawings and elsewhere said 2 stages. Some of the numbers didn't match up. And that can be a common problem when you have multiple people creating the slides if you don't review one another's slides. So as Dr. Rogers mentioned at the very beginning of this critique, please proofread your slides and one another's slides for consistency, typos, and all of that. Okay.
And again, come prepared. You should not ever be arguing in the middle of your presentation about what your design is or not.
Yes. All right. Good luck, everybody.
Bye.